The Epstein case and scandal involves figures from both parties. They're obviously worried about PR and optics, and they have continued for months to kick this can down the road and try and make it go away. Trump has now taken the line that it's a Democrat engineered hoax.
So recently, Whitney Webb went on the Sabby Sabs podcast to talk about what Trump is hiding from the Epstein story, whether she thinks this is a bipartisan cover-up, and what are some plausible explanations as to why the Trump administration has behaved as it has toward this story. She is the author of, I think, the very best book on the Epstein story, One Nation Under Blackmail. So let's get her take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
What happened here? What is happening? And why is Ghislaine Maxwell all of a sudden now being seen as a victim?
Okay, so the Ghislaine Maxwell thing, I should address separately. What you talked about, what you just brought up earlier, I think has been really extraordinary, not in the positive sense, but just kind of, I think most people have been kind of taken aback from it, because what does the administration really gain here after promoting the releases, promoting the perception that they're going to release these files and have this unprecedented era of transparency and things like that. And then instead of doing that, do a very public 180 and just kind of hoped that the trust that some of these figures in government had, like Kash Patel and Don Bongino, having been prominent on the podcast circuit in the past, the trust they built with Trump's base, that being enough for them to kind of swallow this very obvious 180 in rhetoric about these documents, and about a major aspect of the case in general that has been or a theory about Epstein's death in prison that has been heavily popularized or within Trump's base, which is Epstein didn't kill himself kind of stuff, and then they of course attached themselves to that and walked it back.
Yeah, so not only is it evasive that answers haven't come from this administration on this, they also, when faced with the reality that they themselves have changed on this, and I'm talking Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, with all these contradictory statements before and after they assume power, they just act like you're an idiot if you continue to question it after this. It's a Democratic hoax, remember? And Trump had that True Social post about how if you still want answers to this child sex trafficking ring, by the way, which was probably part of a foreign intelligence operation, then yeah, you're just a false supporter. You're not my real supporter anyways. So she's right. What could that mean? What are they hiding? Well, if it's the worst possible things and it's the implications in crimes, I don't know how they would be behaving differently if it wasn't that.
Once in government and as the top two officials in the FBI. So yeah, what do they stand to gain from it? I don't think anyone really knows at this point, because it's very, we have to be kind of speculative here, because we're not going to get like an admission from the Trump administration about what they're actually thinking. They're obviously worried about PR and optics, and they have continued for months to kick this can down the road and try and make it go away after promising it so extensively. So one can't help but think, but there's things in the files that are inconvenient to either the administration, to Trump himself, or to people very close to Trump in his inner circle. And then that's why the documents are not being released for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think all those things are plausible. At the very least, it's things that are embarrassing. At the very worst, things that are highly incriminating and deal with associations with foreign intelligence services and probably Israel, because that's where all the arrows point when it comes to Epstein's associations with foreign intelligence, when it comes to Robert Maxwell and Ari Ben-Menashe and Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi and Ehud Barak being at his house in prolonged lengths of time after he was convicted for child molestation. The arrows point there. But she's right. So a lot of the Democrat, backlash is, well, he's obviously hiding this because he's in the files. And then you get a lot of Republican partisans that are saying, well, no, if he was part of these crimes, this information would have come out during the Democratic administration. And that sounds plausible on the surface, but not if they are implicated in these crimes as well. I mean, this is a uniparty. These people are tied at the hip. Despite all the theatrics we get, the policy is mostly the same, especially from the deep state. So it wouldn't be a big surprise that Trump's name is in the files. He was the president when this investigation began. He had a long-term friendship with Epstein. That alone doesn't say much in my mind. It's what are they trying to hide about what it says about his name in the files. That's the big thing.
So, I started a series. Hopefully the next part will be out next week. I have one installment of 3 out, sort of exploring some people in Trump's inner social circle going back a significant amount of time that could stand to lose some things if they, they may be in the documents based on publicly available open source evidence, and allegedly Trump has also been in the documents. But again, the Epstein story is so often they try and sift it into partisan boxes. So, Democrats, because of how badly this has been managed in terms of the PR optics side of it for Trump's base, have seemingly, smelled blood in the water and have tried to pounce on this and pushing to release the files and are now talking a lot about Epstein. Whereas during, the Biden administration or before that, they didn't really talk about Epstein very much at all.
Yeah, she's totally right. Democrats largely pretended that this was a Republican right-wing conspiracy, that the Biden administration was hiding things about the Epstein files when the situation was reversed. It just shows you how tribal the American political system has made people and put people into boxes on this. There are exceptions to the Democrats that were good on this, by the way. Ron Wyden actually talked about the wire transfers that he has seen that we know exist between Epstein and very prominent people, as he put it, that they are shielding completely. They won't release. Wyden has tried to get that released. He talked about it even when Biden was in power, but she's right. Mostly this has been partisan, and the Democrats didn't exactly talk about this much when Trump was in power the first time. They used Russiagate as their weapon against Trump, not the Epstein case.
Probably because Epstein had a relationship with prominent Democratic politicians, right? So it's kind of a mess, and it's hard to believe, some of these congressmen, for example, that have come out and said, Trump's name is in the documents and they were going to redact it. That's very well possible, but because of how partisan everything is, until we see that evidence that they were redacted and all of that, it'll be hard to know, So again, I think at the end of the day, as I've said and maintained for years now, the Epstein case and scandal involves figures from both parties, especially in the wake of the Republican Party becoming very Trump-centric ever since 2015, 2016. And presumably it's problematic for this documentation to come out for some reason.
Yeah, for all parties. Exactly right. She's right. This implicated and involved people from both parties. And indeed, it is the uniparty. I talked about that a little bit before. But also, I noticed that many of the Democrat opportunists, and I say opportunists to means the Democrats that didn't exactly care about this when Biden was in power, don't often point to the 17 meetings that Epstein had with Clinton during Clinton's presidency. It's almost never talked about, and they are arranged through a White House aide by the name of Mark Middleton. And Mark Middleton mysteriously died in 2022 because of an alleged suicide, just like many of the figures involved in this case, where he was hung, he had an extension cord wrapped around his neck, and he had a shotgun blast to his chest simultaneously. They said that was a suicide, and what he knew about these discussions and arrangements might have been relevant too. They're not talking about that, and it's for a reason. Republicans aren't talking about that much either, by the way.
But, again, we have to kind of speculate as to why that is, because this 180 has not really benefited the administration at all, unless there's something, most people aren't seeing. And it's also possible this 180 could have been planned for some purpose we don't know yet, but will reveal itself in time. So either way, it's all a mess. And it's hard to know what's going on, especially because, Trump has now taken the line that it's a Democrat engineered hoax, the whole Epstein scandal. And he didn't say that back in the first administration when Epstein was arrested and then died in prison when he was president the first time. Right. So why did none of that come up then?
Yeah, and he had about a year and a half after that in the presidency, I think, after that death in August of 2019, right?
Why is it now a Democrat hoax? I mean, he was questioned about Epstein plenty when he was, in office the first time. And then, during the 2024 election, he did an interview with Tucker where Tucker asked him about Epstein. He didn't say it's a Democrat hoax. That's obviously a new line. So why is that being made now? And of course, there's a lot of, influencers that are, I guess, closer to Trump world than others that are very willing to, continue and promote this line of thinking. And then, other people in the online sphere have sort of taken it upon themselves to treat Ghislaine Maxwell as you pointed out, a victim, just as the Trump administration is moving to, they move her to a minimum security prison. Allegedly, she's been allowed into some sort of work release program. And it seems increasingly likely she's going to be pardoned. And
Okay, so a few clarifications on that. She has been moved to a min security prison that isn't, intended to house such brutal offenders as people like Maxwell and what she's charged under. There's not much evidence that she is involved in a work release program. There were rumors of that got out on the internet, but her lawyers have denied that, and I don't know if the prison facility has weighed into that or the Justice Department has weighed into it. It doesn't look like that's true as of now. Whether they're trying to set up a pardon or not, I don't know. I think that'd be the only way to pour more gasoline onto the fire and the mess that this is, as Whitney put it. So if a pardon's coming, I think it would be at the end of Trump's presidency, but people will not forgive Trump for a pardon right now. It'd be the only way to tank his approval rating, especially on issues like this, if he did that now. So I don't think that's going to happen, but just clarity there.
some capacity, which Trump has fielded publicly, both for her and for Diddy before his sentencing.
I don't think that would go over well with his base. Pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell for one, but to your other point, Diddy. I think a lot of them are going to have a problem with that particular one. Is it possible, if you were to make an assumption, is it possible that when you say it's bipartisan with Epstein, is it possible that it could be that even someone that's a part of Donald Trump's administration could also be in those files other than Donald Trump?
Yeah, well, the part 2 of my series is about someone who's in the Trump administration in an important role, but it's not talked about very much in the media, it's not good in terms of the Epstein, not just Epstein, but Maxwell and Jean-Luc Purnell connections.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Trump is behaving in a way that is complicit with this cover-up completely and shifting the goalposts about why over and over, pivoting to Russiagate, pivoting to other issues to try to make this thing go away. It's already eating at his approval, but I think he would be behaving this same way about the cover-up, whether or not it implicated him directly or people close to him, high-ranking officials, lobbyists, politicians, maybe even U.S. senators, things like that, people that did have associations with Epstein that Trump wants to maintain good relationships with, or people from the deep state, bureaucrats. I think he would be behaving the same way, so I don't think we know enough to say one way or the other on that.
Of this person. And a lot of people have speculated, that since I said that I'm writing about someone in the current administration, that it's Howard Lutnick, who was Epstein's neighbor. I wrote about Lutnick like 2 or 3 times in 2024, including his Epstein stuff, before I guess it kind of percolated into the wider public discussion about him being Epstein's neighbor and who he purchased his house from and all this stuff. So it's not him, it's someone else. I'm kind of reticent to spill the beans before the article is out. But it could be very problematic for this particular person. And even though they're not so much in the public eye, what they're doing for Trump is important. And I think Trump would find it almost impossible to denounce this guy because they've been so close for so long. So we'll see. But yeah, that's sort of the theory of this series I'm working on called First Friends. Kind of like First Lady, like a pun on that, where it's basically like, here are a few people that are very close, that have close ties to Trump, and who also had close ties either to Epstein or some of the best known Epstein associates, like Brunel and Maxwell. And Brunel, not unlike Epstein, died in a French prison while awaiting trial in relation to the sex trafficking stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Jean-Luc Brunel receives almost no attention in this whole story, but that was an associate of Epstein, likely a client of Epstein, that indulged in this sex trafficking operation. He was set to go down for crimes related to raping children and arrested for it, I believe, in 2020. French authorities arrested him. He mysteriously died by hanging as well, right? But, you know, you get in these media stories, including in the DOJ and FBI memo that they released about Epstein, that, you know, Epstein had no clients. There's no evidence that he had any clients or there were any other associations with Epstein that partook in these vicious crimes against underage girls. But Jean-Luc Brunel was exactly that. They just pretend that Jean-Luc Brunel doesn't exist, much like a lot of the other figures related to this story. And the fact that Epstein's associations with not only people like Brunel, but also figures from Israeli intelligence, don't enter into the political zeitgeist or any of the actual conversations that go on in the mainstream about Epstein. And they're incredibly important. Whitney pointed them out in her great book, One Nation Under Blackmail. I highly recommend getting that. Also pleased to hear that she's planning on writing more about this as it relates to other officials in the Trump administration. But look, when it's all said and done, this thing is going to chip away at the support of Trump. At some point, he sat down with his political strategists and determined that it would have been more harmful to release the truth about the Epstein files than it will to endure losses in the midterms for his party and jeopardize the rest of his presidential agenda. That's the truth. Whatever is in those files, it's important enough to have them, you know, roll the dice on the future of their party and their agenda by concealing it. And there's no other way to say it than that. This cover-up is bipartisan. I think the most likely scenario is that it does implicate people of prominence on both sides of the political aisle in these crimes. And people are going to say, you know, it's because Clinton's in it, it's because Trump's in it, and I think it's more likely that people from all aisles are in it, whether it's Clinton or Trump that's involved in the crimes. Their names would be in the files regardless. I think that's something of a red herring. But the depth through which this evil stretched into the deep state and stretched into the elite class is something we may never know. And I think it has, you know, a bigger chance to be our generation's version of the JFK story and all the questions that still linger in that case than something that people will just forget about in a year and a half when it's time for the American populace to vote again. That's what I think is the truth. But I do want to hear from you down below. Do you agree with Whitney Webb? What is the Trump administration hiding? What's the most likely reasoning for their cover-up? And do you think that there will ever be answers on the Epstein story, true answers outside of a whistleblower coming forward on this? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Sabrina as well. Great interview, thanks for having it, and Whitney Webb is a great mind on this case. I would like to ask you, if you're interested, please become a YouTube member of mine. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, and in return, I will give you access to all my videos, the members only ones, before they go live on YouTube on my channel, to the general public. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.